So today we will be kickstarting our first training session. So it's all about evaluating. So I think you have gone through the agenda. So I think you remember the Toastmaster promise, right? So you have one line item saying to provide fellow members with helpful constructive evaluations. So this is all about how to evaluate and how to encourage and inspire the confidence. So to start this officially, I would like to call upon our TLI chair, Toastmaster Rubini Sumanasinghe. Rubini, over to you.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters and dear guests. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Rubini, you're audible.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So
I
it is
can
my
hear you.
pleasure. Okay, thank you. It is my pleasure to warmly welcome all of you to today's Division A training session. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We are delighted to see so many enthusiastic leaders and members gathered here to learn, grow, and enhance our Toastmasters journey together. At this point, it is my pleasure to hand over the proceedings to our Division Director, Toastmaster Menaka Pereira, who will officially address the gathering. Division Director, Toastmaster Menaka, the meeting is now yours.
Thank you, TLI Cha. It's very good evening to all of you. Division A, very good evening to all of you. And this is, I think, first training session that we are going to have for Division A for this upcoming year. I would love to see a lot of people who are enthusiastic about this training and to being an evaluator and how to get your things done and in this humorous speech competition which is coming. And it's good to see all these new faces as well as our veteran speakers as also there because we are constant learners. So that is the most important thing that we have seen from the looking at the registration which I saw from today. So overall, I would like to thank our facilitator, DTM Chrishanthi, for accepting our invitation and doing these session payoffs because this session is not only about humorous speech as well as about evaluation, which we're focusing on contests. But there'll be a lot more in this session that you'll learn apart from the contest that which is about to happen. So I will keep it as a secret so that DTM Krishanti will do it at the proper time so that we live and keep the enthusiasm going on and we keep the curiosity as well. So with all that in mind, so learn best so that everybody can help each other throughout this journey. And over to you, TLI Chan. Have happy learning to everyone who's joined today.
Thank you, Division Director Menaka. So, it is now my distinct privilege to introduce our resource person for today's session. Distinguished Toastmaster Chrishanthi Emmanual is a remarkable Toastmasters leader whose journey has spanned more than 2 decades, beginning in 2001. She's a senior past president of the Colombo Toastmasters Club and the charter president of Pinnacle Advanced Toastmasters Club. Her contributions to Toastmasters extend to some of the highest levels of leadership. She was among the first area governors of District 82 and later served as Deputy Lieutenant Governor Education and Training, a role we know today as Program Quality Director. She has also served as a District 82 Chief Judge. What makes her leadership journey even more noteworthy is that she served in these key leadership positions during the era when District 82 encompassed both Sri Lanka and India. Beyond Toastmasters, DTM Chrishanthi has built an outstanding professional career as a corporate governance professional and is a fellow of both UK and Sri Lankan professional associations. She has held senior leadership positions at Aitken Spence and Company, PLC and LOLC PLC, serving as Group Company Secretary and later as Director of LOLC Corporate Services before stepping down 2018. Today, she continues to make a significant impact as a corporate trainer, empowering senior management teams and entrepreneurs through training in successful meetings, corporate communications, effective administration, and organizational best practices. A leader, a governance professional, a mentor, and a trainer. Her journey reflects a lifelong commitment to lead, learn, inspire, and empower others. Fellow Toastmasters, please join me in extending a warm virtual round of applause as I introduce a true Toastmasters leader and accomplished corporate professional, distinguished Toastmaster Chrishanthi Emmanual. DTM Chrishanthi, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Division TLI Chair. Thank you for a very kind introduction, a very flattering one. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I know you've had 2 days holiday, and so maybe it's been even harder for you to get back to work today. But for the moment, I hope you're all able to put all that aside so we can all focus together on what we're going to do, which is going to be looking at evaluations and how we do them. I'm just going to share my screen now so we can all have a look at my slides. Now, you would have probably heard of evaluation being described in various ways. I have heard it being described, the evaluator being described as perhaps like an internal auditor, perhaps like a mother-in-law. And sometimes we have this tendency to talk about evaluators as if they're a little negative. And I think that's really not the most helpful way to look at it. Because as you know, we all join Toastmasters in order to learn and grow. And we all agree that feedback is one of the things we need to learn and grow. So I'd like to encourage all of you today, starting from today, to look on evaluations not in a negative way, and to not look at evaluators also in a negative light, but I'd like to share with you this quote. Feedback is a free education to excellence. A free education to excellence.
Shani, shall we go to the presentation mode?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. So that we can look on this as I said, a free education to excellence, which means that we are now looking at how best we can be excellent in what we are doing. And I'm going to talk about feedback because it's not going to be purely about speech evaluation and not purely about the contest, but also I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can do general evaluations in our clubs. So to begin with, let's just look at this question here. Who benefits from an effective evaluation? Now, I've been told that some of you are from fairly new clubs, and I've been told that some of you are fairly new Toastmasters, but I'm sure that all of you have seen evaluations being done in your clubs. Maybe you've had an evaluation done on your speech, or perhaps you've even done an evaluation for someone else. So can I ask you, if somebody can unmute and perhaps answer this, who benefits from an effective evaluation?
The audience of the meeting.
The audience does, absolutely. The audience benefits because, as we often say, an evaluator speaks to the speaker, but for the whole audience. Okay, and who else?
Everyone who's involved in the meeting, basically.
Yes, definitely. Everyone who's in the audience, they will all hear the evaluations, they'll all benefit. And as we all know, the primary person is the speaker. The speaker is the one who will benefit primarily because it's their own speech which is being evaluated. But as we've also said, the audience benefits because they learn from what the speaker did. They learn what works and what doesn't work because the evaluator has commented on it. But I'd like to also remind you that the third person who benefits from an evaluation is the evaluator themselves. Because I'm sure all of you would agree to this, that the more you evaluate, the better you become at it. So as an evaluator, if you look back perhaps to when you did your first evaluation, and how you are now, hopefully you will see that you have grown as an evaluator, you have improved. So when you think about evaluations, always remember, if somebody asks you to be their evaluator, it's an opportunity for you to also grow and learn. So all three of these people would benefit from an effective evaluation. Now, how do we present our evaluation? I'm talking here now about how we present it, and I'm going to talk to you about a method which has been used and which I myself learned at Toastmasters from the great members of the Colombo Toastmasters Club like Yusuf Jivanji and Halim Gauss. And that was what we call the CRC method. CRC standing for commend, recommend, and comment. And we'll go through each of these things in turn. We start with commend. To commend means to talk about the good things about a speech. And we start with this. We begin with the positives. Now, why do you think we begin with the positives? Think back to a speech that you made. You've made your speech, you've come back, you've sat down, and then the general evaluator comes up and introduces your evaluator. How do you feel at that moment when your evaluator comes up and begins?
Motivated.
Very good, excellent. I need to find out what club you belong to so I can come there. But generally speaking, we can feel a little bit nervous because we don't know what to expect from an evaluation. When we begin with the positives, we find that a speaker tends to relax a little more because the speaker is thinking, oh, great. The evaluator has started by saying something nice about me, something good about my speech, and that the speaker relaxes. And when the speaker relaxes, the speaker is more able and willing to listen to what else you have to say, what else the evaluator has to say. The speaker also begins to trust the evaluator. If the evaluator were to come up and say nothing but negatives, the speaker would think, okay, this person is only looking for all the wrong things I did. And that is why we start throwing up these names like internal auditor or mother-in-law. But if you begin with the positives, then the speaker realizes, okay, this person actually listened to everything I said and was able to identify a lot of good things as well. Therefore, I can be comfortable that this will be quite a balanced evaluation. So the speaker relaxes, the speaker is more willing to listen, the speaker trusts you. Now, because the speaker trusts you, it's very important that you don't break that trust by being too flattering. I think sometimes because we are Toastmasters and we want to encourage people, we might sometimes go to the other extreme and be a little too flattering, like, that was one of the best speeches I heard. I'm sure this is not something which many people do, but maybe in our efforts to be kind, we might try to go a little bit over the limit. And the bad thing about that is then you destroy the trust that the speaker has in you, because the speaker will know at once that you're exaggerating. So we need to be careful about that. We need to be honest and keep the trust that the speaker has in us. So we begin with the positives, and then we go to recommend. The recommend is where we bring in the things where we think, this is what I wish you had done differently, or the things which I think if you had done differently would have made your speech a little better. Now, when it comes to recommending, what we normally say is, pick the most important 2 or 3 things that should change. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say you have a speaker who's made a 5 to 7 minute speech. And while you're evaluating this speaker, you notice 5 things about him, which you jot down in your paper. Number 1, all the time the speaker is speaking, he walks back and forth. He's literally pacing back and forth all the time he's speaking. Secondly, he has his hands in his pockets almost the whole time. Almost the whole time, from the time he walked up and was introduced, he has his hands in his pockets. Thirdly, his 5 to 7 minute speech takes 10 minutes. Fourthly, during the course of that speech, he uses several crutch words. There's and ums, there's you knows, you think, I think. And lastly, the 5th thing you note down is that he doesn't look at the audience at all. So he paced back and forth while talking, had his hands in his pockets the whole time. His 5 to 7 minute speech took 10 minutes, used several crutch words, and he didn't look at the audience at all. Now, you have jotted all these 5 down because as a good evaluator, you have been paying a lot of attention and you noticed all these things. Now, if you go to tell the speaker all these 5 things, the speaker is going to get completely overwhelmed. The speaker is going to think, my goodness, there were just so many things that were wrong. There are so many things I have to put right. And the speaker is going to be not very motivated and probably completely overwhelmed and not looking forward to doing the next speech at all. So pick the most important 2 or 3 things. I would suggest from these 5 things that I mentioned that you pick these 2 things. The pacing back, the hands in the pocket, because that is something which he needs to learn right away, should not be done whenever he comes in front of an audience. Now, this person might come in front of the audience as a timer. He might come up as a table topic speaker. He might come up as anything, not apart from being a prepared speaker. But if you tell him when you come up to the front, please make sure your hands are not in your pockets, then that's number 1 thing he can do straight away, which will apply to everything he does when he comes to the front of the stage. Secondly, you tell him about the pacing, because pacing is again something he should learn not to do. And if you tell him that's the reason we didn't want you to pace is because you were distracting the audience, he'll understand that. And thirdly, tell him about the eye contact. And there again, the reason is because when he comes up there, whether to be a timer or whether to be a table topic speaker, if you mention eye contact, he will know that he has to do that whenever he comes to the front for whatever reason. So out of the 5 things that were wrong, we picked only 3 because these 3 things are the 3 things which will really be the things he can change, which will impact him not just as a prepared speaker, but as anybody who comes up to the front. Even if he's playing the role, for instance, of table topic master or anything like that, he will remember not to pace, not to keep his hands in his pockets, and to make sure he looks at the audience. The remaining 2 things, such as using a lot of crutch words, that his speech went way over time, you don't need to mention that too much. You can simply tell him a little more practice next time will help you, because more practice will make sure those things will gradually disappear. So we pick the 2 or 3 most important things. And then we also pick things that can be corrected by the very next speech. If, for instance, I'm evaluating somebody and I say to that person, if you had a better vocabulary, your speech could be more descriptive, your words could be richer. You can build mental pictures with your words and we can see what you're talking about. Now, if I was to say this as an evaluator, what is that speaker going to do between now and the next meeting? If the next meeting is 2 weeks away, even if he literally swallows a dictionary, he cannot improve his vocabulary in 2 weeks. Therefore, something like that is not helpful to him. So ideally, apart from picking the most 2 or 3 important things he should change, out of those also make sure that whatever you pick are things which he can correct by the very next speech. And then we go to comment, which is the 3rd thing. So commend the positives, recommend things he can change, and comment. And when we say comment, what we simply mean is that you summarize and you end on a positive note. It's always good to end on a positive note, because I had put a picture there of a chocolate ice cream, because as you know, when you have a good meal, good dessert is always welcome. And something like chocolate ice cream, the taste can linger on your tongue. That last mouthful of chocolate ice cream, the taste can linger on your tongue. It's a sweet, cool, lingering taste. And that's a little bit like what your evaluation should be like. When you finish and walk away and the speaker is reminding himself of what you said, it's nice if he can remember it as something pleasant, something which leaves a good taste in his mouth. So commend, recommend, and commend. That is how we would present an evaluation. Now let's go to how do you actually prepare one. But before that, we'll have a quick look at our pathways evaluation forms. If you remember, pathways evaluation forms generally have 3 sections on them. You excelled at, you may want to work on, and to challenge yourself. So where it asks you excelled at, this is where you would go and write your commendations or the things you want to comment. You may want to work on, This is where you would write down your recommendations or what you recommend should be done instead. To challenge yourself. Now, this is the hard one because the challenge, as we all know, is not something that's very easy to do. So that category, which is to challenge yourself, are those things which you think for the speaker are going to be a little harder to change. It's like we said, when you pick the two most important things from the 5, for the speaker, that thing about facing the audience might be one of the harder things because he's just so very nervous. So you might tell the speaker, for instance, challenge yourself to look at the audience. If you don't want to look at everybody, look at your 1 or 2 friends whom you have in the audience and maintain eye contact with them first, and then gradually you'll get used to looking at everybody else. So when you write your evaluation down, if you want to break it up into the 3 pathways sections, this is where you would put them: the recommend, and the challenge. And of course, you would end with a summary, which you may not write down on the sheet of paper, but in your verbal evaluation, you will end with that summary. And this is why I would suggest that when you are making your points, your commendations, and your recommendations, make them short and simple, because otherwise you cannot summarize them easily. And that becomes very important when it comes to your contests. As you know, part of the contest marks goes on how well did you summarize. So if, for instance, you excel that and you make a long, complicated sentence about the things that speaker did really well, and then the recommendations, you make long, complicated sentences about what the speaker must change, when it comes to your summary, you're going to find it very difficult to summarize them. So however you are doing your evaluation, remember to make these sentences short so you can summarize them easily. Now, having looked at how we present it, let's look at how we actually create our evaluation. How do we create the evaluation, which we will then present to all the members? As an evaluator, what do you look for? Generally speaking, we suggest that you look for these 3 things: what you saw, what you heard, and what you felt. What do you look for? What you saw, what you heard, and what you felt while the speaker was speaking. So what did you see? These are some of the things you would have seen. You would have seen the eye contact of the speaker, their gestures, and other body language. And I have said other body language here because sometimes as speakers, we have this nervous tendency to maybe rock back and forth. You might have seen speakers doing this. They're not walking back and forth, but they're standing and they're gently rocking back and forth on their leg because they're nervous. So that's one of the things you see: eye contact, their gestures, and this other kind of body language. Then their use of the speaking area. Now here, of course, I'm very particular about this because I'm one of those people who thinks that you should not actually have to cover the stage from left to right. I've heard many evaluators trying to tell their speakers exactly what part of the speech should have been on the left-hand side, what part of the speech should have been on the right-hand side, and it all gets very, very confusing. And people start to think that there is some kind of law where you start on the left and then move to the middle and then move to the right, and we just confuse people. The speaking area or moving around is mainly done, remember, to add value to your speech. So a good place to move is when you pause. If you have a pause in your speech, then you would move during that time, because then while you're pausing, you can move without having to walk and talk. So if you're looking at your speaker and you're evaluating them and you see that all they're doing is they're just trying to cover the speaking area, go from this end to that end, then you will see that as one of the things they did. And you will think to yourself, did that add value to their speech? Just going like this from side to side, did it add value to their speech? So you would look at their use of the speaking area. Then their appearance. Of course, this varies from club to club, but generally speaking, what we say is respect yourself and respect your audience. So if you are coming up front to speak to people and they're looking at you, think to yourself, am I dressed in such a way that they will know I respect them as an audience and I respect myself for who I am? Think of it that way, and also think in terms of, would you be doing this perhaps in a corporate environment? Sometimes we get too relaxed in our Toastmasters clubs and too comfortable, and we might get carried away. But remember, we learn at Toastmasters in order to go out and perform in those other areas of our life, the corporate world, maybe our place of worship, wherever else it is. So we need to think in terms of that also. Their use of props. Now, this may not be for every single speaker, but you might find some speakers who come out with a prop like their mobile phone or their visiting card or something like that. And then you would probably find that again, you would look at how they had. Maybe we can mute this mics. Right. Then apart from what you saw, what did you hear? As you were listening to the speaker, what did you think you heard? So this would cover things like vocal variety. Did the speaker have vocal variety or not? How was the speech structure? Very often you would have learned this when you joined as a new Toastmaster, that you have to have an opening, a body, and a conclusion. Did the speaker have that? Was there a logical flow to the speech? Were there transitions so you could follow them easily? What about the language that was used? Were there a lot of crutch words? Was the language the kind of language which made you follow the topic really easily? Was it rich language? What about the use of humor or personal stories, facts or statistics? Was there a mix of information in the speech? The sincerity or the credibility, did the speaker seem to really know and believe what they were speaking about? And what was their tone like? Sometimes we might feel that the speaker comes there and talks to us like he's some kind of lecturer or he's giving us some kind of religious sermon. So the tone also would matter. So when you think about what you heard from the speaker, you would think about all these things. This is what I heard from the speaker. Then what did you feel? Now remember, at the end of the day, as much as we try to make this some kind of science or some kind of exact thing, and we have all these things written on our sheet, at the end of the day, what is happening is, as a human being, you are sitting there and listening to another human being. So you will react in some way. What you felt is a reaction to the speech, and that is also going to be there in how you respond as an evaluator. So for instance, did you think the speaker was convincing? Did the speaker convince you about what point they were trying to make? Did you feel they were well prepared because they were really good with their timing, they were good with their flow? Or did you feel they were nervous because, for instance, they were not within the time, either very much under or maybe very much over? Did you feel they were persuasive or motivational or informative? There are some speeches which need to be persuasive. But if a person is trying to persuade you, they need to tell you what they want you to do. So if somebody comes and says, I want to persuade you, but doesn't tell you what they want you to do, you know that that hasn't really worked. Are they trying to motivate you? Do you feel motivated? Have they given you information? Do you feel that now you are better informed? How do you feel after hearing the speaker? What did you think about the topic? Was the topic interesting? Was it appropriate for this audience? And you have a mixed audience in Toastmasters clubs, so you can think to yourself, was it the kind of topic that everybody could agree on? Was it a relatable topic that we sort of felt we could, yes, understand what was happening? And how about the message? Was the message confusing, or was the message really clearly explained? Those are things you would feel about what you felt. So what you saw, what you heard, and what you felt. Those are what are going through your mind when you're sitting and listening to a speaker, and you'll be jotting down based on these things. This is how you are creating your evaluation. This is what I saw of the speaker. I can put these under commendations. I can put these under recommendations, and maybe these under challenges in terms of how I saw it, how I heard it, and what I felt about it. So there's a lot we need to look at. I know sometimes for evaluators, they come up there and they have very little to say. And generally, when they have very little to say, they tend to talk a lot about stage usage or body language. But really, as evaluators, we need to focus on the content. What is the message the speaker is giving us? Because at the end of the day, when we are trying to put a Sri Lankan on the world stage for the international speech contest, that contestant has got there because they have gone through club, area, division, and district and been evaluated and mentored all the way on the basis of a strong message on good content. So we need to think about all those when we are evaluating people and look at more than just the physical aspects. We look at how they come across as we listen to them, and we think about all the things we saw, we heard, and we felt. I will just flip back to those 3 slides for you to just have a look at those again in terms of what you saw, eye contact and gestures, body language, use of the speaking area, the address and the props, what you heard in terms of what the vocal variety, the speech structure, logical flow and transitions, language usage, use of humor, personal stories, fact statistics, sincerity, credibility, and tone, and what you felt. What did you feel about the speaker? What did you feel about the topic? And what did you feel about the message? Now, I want to go next to some of the do's and don'ts about evaluations. Some of the things we should and shouldn't do. Firstly, please don't. Please don't summarize the speech. It's unfortunate, but sometimes evaluators come up there and they would say things like, you told us how, as a schoolboy, you had to walk 5 miles to school, and though you didn't like it at that time and you hated it every single day, later when you grew up, you realized how that contributed towards your health and your well-being and how you enjoyed viewing nature on your way. Now, if you say this to your speaker, the only thing your speaker can do is listen and look at you and nod his or her head, because you're telling the speaker what they already know. You're telling the speaker what the speaker himself said. So by doing that, you're not really adding any value to the speaker. You're just repeating the speech. Even the audience is not learning anything from you, because all you're doing is rehashing what the speaker said. So please don't summarize the speech. If you want to pick some section from the speech to quote it, you would only do that if you want to use it as an example. So for instance, you might say, you really brought out the tension in the moment when you talked about how you were standing alone in the dark and you could hear the leaves and the trees rustling and you were worried about what was going to come out of the bush. So that's an example of how you would actually, again, refer to what was said in the speech, and you might repeat part of it, but only a little bit just to bring out the point that you're trying to make. So don't summarize the speech. Please don't be vague or not specific enough. For instance, people might say, you told a story when you began. That was good. Or they may say, you had humor right through your speech. That was nice. So the speaker doesn't really know why was it good or why was it nice. They might be happy to hear that, but if they don't understand why it's good or why it's nice, they won't know how to use that knowledge to make their next speech also a good speech. So it's better if you say something like, you used humor in your speech, which is nice because humor connects you to the audience. We all like to laugh together. Or you might say you opened with a story and that was good because we all love to hear stories. And so from the beginning itself, you had your audience in your hand. So always, even if it's something that's been done well, please explain why it was good or nice so that they can use that tactic for their next speech. Please don't add your own thoughts on the topic. Now, let's say, for instance, I will say to somebody, you spoke on the recent prison riots. And then I will pause and I will say, I have often thought to myself, is jail time really the best thing to do for a drug offender? Now, at that point, I am bringing my own ideas into this speech. The speaker has spoken on the prison riots, and without evaluating the speech, I am bringing my own thoughts, which is on whether people should go to jail or not. Sometimes, again, as I said, because we get very familiar with our club members and we are like family, we don't realize and we have big conversations. But your role as an evaluator is not to do that. Your role as an evaluator is simply to evaluate the speech, so don't add your own thoughts on it. Don't insist on including your own personal favorites. Now, I once tried to take part in a speech contest, and after I did my little speech and finished and came off, a lot of my friends came round and tried to advise me on how I could have done it better. And one of the things I realized by listening to them was that each person was telling me that part of a speech which really works well for them. So, for instance, somebody will say to me, questions. Questions are the important thing. Always ask questions because that way you get the audience involved. Somebody else will say, body language. Don't just stand in one place. You must have proper gestures. You must move around. You must have body language. Someone else will say humor. Humor is the thing. You have to get the audience laughing. So actually, in a way, each of those things is true. Each of those things are a good element of a good speech. But when you're evaluating, remember, you are evaluating some other human being who has written a speech based on their own personality. So we might feel differently, but we are looking at the speaker and thinking, this is how the speaker is. This is what the speaker is like. And this is the speech the speaker is making. And therefore, we are only evaluating on that. We might feel, for instance, that the speaker stood only in one place, didn't move at all. And that made us feel like he was giving us a lecture. So we might then say, this would make your speech go down better. But we can't insist on saying, this is what you have to have in your speech, because this is what I do and I know this works for me. Remember, we are not there to make mini-me's. We're not there to make clones of ourselves. We are there to, as TI says, to help each other to develop along their own strengths. So we should be careful not to do that. And then we shouldn't speak generally. For instance, somebody might come and say, you know, in your speech, you had these little singular phrases. Now, of course, here it doesn't matter because all of us understand that. But if you're looking at international, you have to think about translating it. And then I think to myself, how can you speak for me? How do you know whether I understand that or not? So we need to be a little careful when we are evaluating someone, not to generally speak. Or you might say something like, you were so soft. Nobody in the back could hear you. Now, that's not the best thing to say because you don't know what people in the back could hear or not. It's better to say something like, I was in the third row and I had to struggle to hear you. So I wonder whether people in the back could actually hear you. Don't speak generally, speak only for yourself, but put the comment across in a way that the speaker can understand where they can improve. Now, here are some things that you should do. You should actually give examples. Now, this is one of the things that we need to give a little extra thought for as an evaluator. For instance, let's say you tell the speaker, you should have had more body language. And I might say, yes, Mr. Evaluator, I agree with you. I am bad at body language. I don't know how to do body language. Please help me. Help me as my evaluator. Tell me, what can I do? So as my evaluator, the person who's evaluating should give me an example. They might say, for instance, right, so your speech topic was about the bank scams and how money is disappearing from banks. Now, that is not the kind of topic where it's easy to use body language, but here are some things you could have done. You could have said that in today's modern world, the way people steal money is they don't put a gun to your head, rather they put a phone and they cheat you over the phone. Try to always give an example of where you are telling them they should do better. Because remember, if you can't find an example, maybe that's why the speaker also couldn't figure out a way to do it. So do try to give an example on how they can do it. Remember also to present your evaluation as a speech in itself. This is, of course, something you would know that you should have your opening, your body, and your conclusion. Now, this is not to say that you make your speech into a grand affair. Some people come to evaluation contests and it's more like a prepared speech that they're making, which is not what I'm saying you should do. But remember, when you begin your evaluation, when you're preparing, do think of a nice way to start it and a nice way to end it. Anyway, you're beginning with commendations and you're ending with a comment, both of which are supposed to encourage your speaker. So think of a nice way to do it. But remember, this is your chance to also improve your skills as an evaluator by figuring out how to take all these in and put them together and get across a nice evaluation. Do be professional and gracious about it. I know it's meant to be an evaluation and sometimes we might have to say things which are not very positive, but we are all professionals and we know that if we practice this here at Toastmasters, we'll be able to do this when we are in our corporate world as well. And we are working with people where we have to tell them where maybe they have not done things the correct way. This is why I am a little cautious about using the word improve, because I think when you say improve, that means that I know exactly what should be done and you are completely wrong. I don't like to say it for that reason. So we would say things like, how about if you try it this way? Or I would have liked it if you did it that way. Or I think it might have been better if it was like this. Or I believe it could be more effective that way. It's our opinion at the end of the day. And so I think we need to be a little gracious about it and not make it seem as if we know what is right and the speaker doesn't know that. So we need to be a little professional and gracious. We should also mention if they are very much under or over time. Now, the reason I say this is because we have a timer and we have an hour counter, and they are technically actually part of the evaluation team, because we take their comments into consideration when we are writing our evaluation. And if somebody has been very much under or over time, it generally means there is a lack of preparation. But also as an evaluator, you can comment to them about how they could have made it better. For instance, if they are very much over time, you could have said, I suggest that you, instead of having 4 stories in your speech, you just bring it down to 3. Because if not, you go on too long and it doesn't become as effective, because 3 stories would have got the point across just as well as 4. So why not drop the 4th story, keep it down to 3 stories and keep it to the time. If they're very much under time, you can say something like, I know it's an icebreaker and you feel that there was nothing much you could talk about, but you mentioned at one place that your father had this love of keeping fish. So if you had nothing else to talk about, you could have picked up that point and talked a little more about the fish. What kind of fish did he keep? What colors were they? What did your mother think about it? Did they have to feed them often? And you could have built in a little more extra into your speech for that. As an evaluator, remember, we are trying to help the speaker. So we need to give them ideas about how they can be there to be either under or over time. In terms of timing, I want to also point out to you that even in the corporate world, timing can be very important. Imagine if you're at a management meeting, for instance, and they tell you, okay, you have only 5 minutes to make your presentation, or they say this to argue your point for your budget. So you can't actually say, no, that's okay, because I'm a Toastmaster and I have prepared 15 minutes to speak on. You can't do that. If they say you have 5 minutes, you have to prepare all your points and be able to present it in 5 minutes. And that's why at the club, we help each other to keep to time, so that when we are in the outside world and we have a time limit or a time barrier, we are skilled enough to know how to do it in the time that we are given. And did the speaker meet the objectives? This is something which is critically important and should be at the core of any evaluation. Did the speaker meet the objectives? Because remember, for any of the parts that we are doing, any level that we are doing, there is always an objective. And the main thing we have to see is, did the speaker meet the objectives or not? Now, what are the objectives? And in fact, why do we read them out before the speech? The objectives tell the audience what the speaker is trying to achieve, which is why before a speech is done, the evaluator comes out and reads the objectives. This prepares the audience to hear what the speaker is trying to achieve. What is the objective of the speaker? And this is why when we are evaluating them, if the speaker has not met the objectives, that says that the speaker has not prepared well, or not prepared enough, or not read the manual, because the objective is not met. Now, the purpose of the objective is to help the speaker to focus on that area or element of speaking and develop it. So let's say, for instance, it's body language. Let's say the objective is body language, and the speaker comes up there and delivers a speech, and they hardly use any body language at all. Then even if it was a very entertaining speech, very humorous, and had a nice story, and was well within the time, had a good structure, and had no filler words, and there was good eye contact, even if all that is there, the evaluator has to say, you did not meet the objective. The objective is to develop body language. Now, again, I want to say here, I'm not saying body language meaning that you need to have a drama there, because let's face it, we are looking at how we use body language, even in a corporate presentation. So if you are presenting something to your audit committee or to your board of directors, definitely you won't be jumping from corner to corner of the stage and moving back and forth, but you have to hold their attention. Maybe because even more so in a corporate world, the subject that you're presenting might be fairly technical, maybe a little boring, maybe the board is tired, they've already sat there for 2 hours. So you have to make sure you can hold their attention. So there is a form of body language you can develop, which you can use in very formal circles as well. And it's our duty as Toastmasters to help each other to learn that. So we can use it in our corporate setting also. Let's say it's vocal variety, same thing. We won't go to a meeting and sing or make a big show there. But we have to be able to tell our management team, maybe our regional advisor, whoever it is, we have to be able to have a 50-minute presentation where we are able to use vocal variety well. So the objective is very, very important when we are evaluating somebody. We need to say, have they met the objectives? Now, some of you would have seen this, I know, but I just want to repeat this in terms of what the objectives are. These are what you find in pathways for the first and second speeches of almost any level or on almost any path. The first level of almost any path, the first and second speeches, you get this. The purpose statements. The first one says, the purpose of this project is for the member to prepare a speech on any topic, receive feedback, and apply the feedback to a second speech. Number 2 says, the purpose of this speech is for the member to demonstrate that he or she has applied the feedback received from his or her first speech. Now, I have sometimes sat at various club meetings and heard an evaluator come out and read both these, 1 and 2 both. And I'm thinking to myself, so I'm not clear. That speaker who's coming up, is the speaker doing the very first speech or is the speaker doing the second speech? And then I think to myself, is the evaluator clear? Does the evaluator know what he's doing? Because if he's reading both out, that means maybe he hasn't understood what he's supposed to be doing. So we need to be very clear about this. What is the objective? Now, this one, for instance, the first project is any topic, you get your feedback. Then the second speech, you only need to read out number 2, which is that the member is now going to make a speech to demonstrate that he or she has applied the feedback received from his or her first speech. And if it's their very first speech, you only read number 1, which is just make any speech on any topic and get feedback. So we need to be very clear as evaluators also, what is the objective? And as speakers, we need to be clear what is the objective. And that's why that relationship between speaker and evaluator is so important, because we need to be clear what are they speaking on and on what basis are we evaluating them. I'll just take you through some of the other speeches at the higher levels of pathways. For instance, the mentoring. The purpose statement here talks about the purpose of the project, and then it talks about the purpose of the speech. So, for instance, the purpose of the project is for the member to apply mentoring skills. But the purpose of this speech is to share some aspect of that, what the experience was. And then there's even a note to the evaluator saying that this person making the speech has spent some time evaluating a fellow Toastmaster. So if you're the evaluator, you need to read through all this and you need to tell yourself, right, this person who's making a speech has been mentoring a Toastmaster, has read how to do it, has read how to be a mentor, and has mentored somebody, and is now coming to share some aspect of that. So if the speaker comes up there and just gives you some principles of mentoring and tells you how important mentoring is and then goes and sits down, as an evaluator, you should be in a position to say, where was your personal aspect? You didn't even name the person whom you were mentoring. Okay, you didn't want to name the person. You didn't share any examples or any stories. It's meant to be the personal, some aspect of your experience as a mentor. So we need to be very clear about that. And again, the speaker needs to be clear. And again, I have sat in clubs and I've heard people read out the purpose statement instead of the speech. The speech should be, the member will deliver a well-organized speech about his experience as a Toastmasters mentor. That is what the speech objective is. The rest is the background information for the purpose of the speaker and for the evaluator to have a full understanding of how to evaluate. Here is the one on leadership. Now here again, you have the purpose of the project, which tells you what it is about. It's about leadership styles, identifying that. And then you have the purpose of the speech, which is to talk about some aspect of leadership. And again, there is a note to the evaluator, and the note says that the member has done a questionnaire, which means that the member has been given support to figure out what is their leadership style. And then the speech is they're going to talk about the leadership style. So again, for the speaker, they need to know what are they trying to achieve through this speech. And for the evaluator, they need to know what is the speaker trying to achieve. Can I help them to identify whether they have achieved it or not? And if they haven't, what could they have done differently? Objective is very, very important. And that's why I want to stress this point, which is that content matters and not just delivery. I know it's easy for us to talk a lot about delivery because things like body language, vocal variety, use of speaking area, and eye contact are so easy to spot and to talk about. But content is very, very important. Structure, all those things. So please do think about those as well. Now, at a contest, just to remind you, you have only 3 minutes to present. So this is what I would suggest you do. Analyze while the speech is going on and write down the positives and the negatives. You might have different formats. You may like to write them on the left and right hand side of a paper or the top and bottom half, but you write down your positives and your negatives on your sheet of paper, and then you decide which strengths and weaknesses you will present. Remember, again, there might be some which are very obvious, so it's good if you pick those up, because otherwise the judges will think you didn't notice that. There may be some other things which maybe you think, okay, this would really add value. So do pick those up as well, because you might have a strong point there which other evaluators didn't catch, other contestants didn't catch, and so the judges can mark you on that. And remember, when they take away your sheet of paper, you need to remember this in your head. These were what I observed as the strengths and weaknesses, and these were what I chose as the strengths and weaknesses I will present. While you're sitting there waiting for your turn to come, for you to be called up, that is where you structure this in your head. You prepare your opening and your conclusion, and you structure the commendations, the recommendations, and the summary. Structure that in your mind. And then be conscious of the timing, because by the time the green card comes up, you should already be at the recommendation stage. You should have finished your commendations very quickly and be at the recommendation stage by the time the green card comes up, so you can develop it further. And by the time the red card comes, you should definitely be winding up. And in terms of an objective, remember that what you're looking for is a message. Remember, we talked about how you evaluate against an objective. So when you're evaluating a contest speech or evaluating the test speech, your objective is what was their message. I have sat beside some great evaluators like Yusuf Jivanji, and I've been very impressed with the speech. And I've said, Yusuf, great speech, right? And he has turned to me and he said, Chrishanthi, what did he really say? So there are some judges whom you can't impress with a lot of show. You need to really have some strong content, some message there. So when you are evaluating, think of that. And in the contest, think about that as well. That's the objective. And did they meet that objective? Did they communicate a proper message? So you need to show the judges that as an evaluator, that you can listen attentively. You have listened attentively to what the test speaker was saying. Show the judges that you can analyze critically, that you looked at what they were doing and you figured out where it was going right, where it was going wrong, what made it be right and what made it be wrong, and that you can present a constructive evaluation. Listen attentively, analyze critically, and present a constructive evaluation, which means that you need to show the judges that you know what makes an effective communicator. You need to know what makes an effective communicator, so you can show the judges, I know what it is, and that's why I know this person is up there on that scale, or maybe not as much, and this is what will make them an effective communicator. And again, to stress the point that content matters and not just delivery, because it's not performance. It's not just a performance, it's communicating a message. So all that matters. I just want to move to another section, which is about evaluating leadership. We've talked so far about evaluating the communication aspect of our members, but now I want to go to evaluating leadership, and this is done by the general evaluator. So as a general evaluator, what is your objective? Now, this is a quote from the TI website. Those days we would talk about a Toastmasters meeting being a positive and mutually supportive environment. This is what TI has on its website now. It says this is what you have at a Toastmasters meeting, and every meeting is a safe opportunity to practice both planned speeches and unplanned responses, give and receive meaningful feedback, and step into leadership opportunities. So this is the objective of any Toastmasters club meeting. And this is the objective we'll be looking at and thinking, the club meeting that we just had, did we meet these objectives? So what do you observe or analyze or comment on? First of all, the room arrangements you would look at and you will say, did they support this objective? So you would talk about things like, for instance, was the room maybe too hot, too cold? Was there too much external noise? Another meeting going on in the other room? Was there signposting? Could we not find the place properly? Were people wandering around the hotel and couldn't find the room or around the office? What about the seating layout? Were we able to see and hear each other clearly? So the room arrangements, did they meet that objective? Then you would go to the role players. Did they facilitate this objective? For instance, did they introduce the Next person well? Did they keep a flow going? Did the Toastmaster conclude nicely and hand over to the table topic master? Did the table topic master conclude it nicely and hand it back? Did they call up the general evaluator? Was there a proper flow of the meeting, or was it keeping on breaking up into bits? Did the round robin master introduce the role well so that even a brand new person could understand it? But was it also creative? These are things we will comment on in terms of the role players and facilitating the objective. What about the audience? Did they provide a supportive environment? Of course, positively, the audience can do this by applause, but negatively, they can do this by actually disturbing. So it's not actually a supportive environment, but they can actually disturb. So as a general evaluator, you should look at these three things and say, did these three things play a part in actually achieving this objective? Now, I believe evaluations actually help us to raise the bar, because evaluations, as we say, they are what help us to do better. So a general evaluator will help the club as a whole to raise the standards of their meetings. And therefore, I'm saying as general evaluator, don't waste that opportunity to raise the bar of your club. So highlight exceptions. For instance, if you normally have a club banner, you normally have the national anthem, you normally have the Sri Lankan flag, no need to just mention them unless something has gone wrong. Okay, today we didn't have our banner. Today somebody forgot to bring the gavel. Or somebody has done something very well. And you say, wow, we've got these, all the ribbons that our club has won. They're all displayed here for us to see. They're very proud of that. So you would highlight the exceptions. Then you would talk about the protocol and the etiquette. For instance, sometimes members are having a conversation among themselves while the speaker is speaking. And they're not exactly whispering either. So all the way to the front, you can hear side conversation going on. So you might need to mention that. Then members are walking around, going back and forth to get refreshments. Or maybe they were leaving the room and coming back later. And you need to comment on the fact that that is showing disrespect for the speaker. The person standing up in front needs to be respected and not be insulted by people doing these things. Or you might find the head table is talking among themselves. They're having a discussion. They're running short on time, right? Table topic master, only 4 topics, right? Or they're not even paying attention to the speaker. They're busy checking their phone or their notes. So again, that needs to be commented on, because if you want to pass notes at the head table, you want to communicate, you do it by passing a small note. But you should also pay attention to the speaker. Otherwise, it looks as if you don't care what's happening in front. Were the role players truly in control of the meeting? Now here, I don't know whether this happens at your club, but certain clubs I have seen where at the beginning of the meeting, the sergeant at arms or the president will tell members, please turn off your phone, please put it on silent, please don't go in and out of the room. And at the end of the meeting, the general evaluator might comment on it and say, it didn't happen the way it should have happened. But ideally, if the role players during the course of the meeting also should control. We pass control with the gavel, which means that the Toastmaster and the topic master are in control of the meeting at that time. So if somebody's phone goes off, the Toastmaster can stand up and say, I want to remind you again to please put your phones on silent. That is part of your role as being in control of the meeting. In addition to all your other things which you have prepared and bought, you should be ready to be in control of the meeting and addressing these issues as well. And again, I would like to point out that this you can use in your corporate life as well, because you might be conducting meetings in your corporate world also, or be in charge of presentations which are being made by your team to your managing director. And you need to show that you have control over your team. So your managing director knows that you actually are part of that team, but you are a leader in that team. Then time management. Time management, of course, you would look at the agenda and say, are we in time as per the agenda? But you might also say things like, when the speakers were going over time, Mr. Table Topic Master, you should have cut down on the number of table topic speeches. Or Mr. Toastmaster, perhaps you could have avoided having that whole section on members' comments. You need to be able to also advise the role players so they know how they can also help to manage time better for everybody. Then maybe in terms of introductions, because I know once I was at a meeting where the Toastmaster realized we had lost a lot of time. And so he kept his introductions to a bare minimum. It was very nice of him because he had spent a lot of time and trouble preparing introductions, but he realized that if he was going to say all those things, it would go over time. So he just cut it down, which was very good. And then the pre-meeting preparation, for instance, you would look at that. Pre-meeting preparation would include things like, was the agenda sent out in time? Were the role players there? And then you would also look at things like when the role players come up to read their role as timer or counter, are they reading from a script? Because I've thought to myself, we need to teach our Toastmasters to be communicators. And if we keep on giving them scripts, they will never learn how to make their own speeches. Learning how to introduce your role, for instance, is very good. So we should tell them to learn that by themselves. And if there's a use of script, maybe you need to comment on that. Maybe they should have made their pre-meeting preparation in a different way, learned their role beforehand and come up, but not come and read out from a script. Then you have mid-course corrections. For instance, were the agenda changes announced in time or not? And again, even for the corporate world, you might find out this is something that's needed there also, where you're in charge of some meeting and somebody comes and suddenly says, no, boss has to leave early. What of these can you cut out? Can you change something around? Bring the important things to the top first. And you need to be in a position to know how to do those things and to bring the main core things forward and try and get rid of the unnecessary things. So we learn those at Toastmasters meetings, and as a general evaluator, you will point it out. And role players, of course, you will speak on them. How well did they play their roles, including evaluators? You might find that somebody was a little too harsh or a little too soft, and you might like to throw in one sentence or so to make the speaker feel better. So as general evaluator also, you have a big role to play in keeping the standards of the club high and helping the role players. And that is how we learn our leadership. And this is how we help each other to improve our leadership as well. But again, as general evaluator, when you finish, you encourage the club to keep getting better, but you end on a positive note. So as you can see, I hope I've helped you to see that as evaluators, as speech evaluators, and as general evaluators, there's a lot we can do. There's a lot we can learn as evaluators in terms of how we observe, how we analyze, how we note down, how we prepare and present it, from everything from speech evaluator to table topic evaluator to general evaluator, that all these things we can do. And I also want to show you that feedback is one of the most important things we can have. And if it's our joy and our opportunity to play that role of giving feedback, let's take that as best as we can and make the best use of it. Because at the end of the day, feedback lights the way between who you are and who you can become. And that is our joy as fellow Toastmasters to help one another to do this. We give each other feedback, and thereby we light the way between where a person is and where they can become and how they can get to that point. Back to you, Madam TLI Chair.
Thank you very much, DTM Chrishanthi, for that insightful and enriching session. Actually, I have heard for many analytical evaluations, but this you have critically evaluated how to do an evaluation. For example, how we create the evaluations, what you saw, what you heard, and how you felt. That is a strong point out, because I have never heard that kind of a critically analyzed situation and well presented evaluation. Like this presentation is like all in one, not all together, like speech evaluation, contest evaluation, and the role of the general evaluator. Thank you so much, DTM Krishanthi, for this session. I'm sure all of us gain valuable knowledge and practical takeaways that we can apply both within Toastmasters and our professional lives. To further engage with our speaker and clarify any questions, we will now move into the questions and answers session. For that, I would like to invite Toastmaster Jeffrey to take over. Toastmaster Jeffrey, over to you.
Toastmasters, are you ready to evaluate? So the stage is all yours. So I think the club contests are coming in the horizon. So get on the stage and start evaluating. So DTM Chrishanthi is all yours. Any questions, ask. Let's get those clarified and call it a day after that. So stage is all yours. Please do ask questions. Anything to clarify? You're warmly welcome. I'm sure you have a ton of questions after the encouraging session. So we have some questions in the chat as well. Could you please give us an example of a good opening and conclusion of an evaluation?
A good opening, I would link it to something which the speaker had actually said. Let's say, for instance, the speaker had come up and talked about how they learned, how they enjoyed flying kites at golf fairs. So I might begin my evaluation by saying something like, it was great to hear a speech which took us back to our childhood, and I could just wish I could go and fly a kite there, like sending all my troubles away. I would link it to something, ideally something which was part of the speech, as a small introduction, because as I said, you just have barely a few seconds. You shouldn't spend too much time on that introduction. So I would pick up something from the speech the speaker made, and I would link it with that. Or I might pick up something like, let's say they spoke about prostitution. I might say, I congratulate you because you picked a very bold and controversial topic to speak on. You were bold enough to speak on a very controversial topic. I might pick something like that as an opening. And as a conclusion, I would probably say, depending again on the speech, it would have to be something like, we enjoyed listening to your speech on flying kites at golf fairs. And I know many of us are not admitting to it now, but I'm betting that if you go there next Sunday, you'll find a whole lot of Toastmasters all buying kites. It'd be nice to end with something which is a little humorous as well. Now, I have been told by people, I don't know whether it's still happening, that sometimes people go to a contest with an opening and a conclusion already kind of prepared and like a standard evaluation, and they just try to fit it around the speech. I would recommend you don't do that, because I don't know whether judges will also be able to see through what you have done. But on the grand scale of things, it doesn't really help you develop your individual style as a Toastmaster. I would say if you're listening really carefully to the speaker and analyzing as they speak, within you as that human being, you will know what reacts to what the speaker is saying. And you will find it therefore easy to pick up something which you can use in your introduction because it links to the speech. And similarly, something to round it off at the end, because again, it will link with the speech. So what I've given you are just brief examples based on a fictitious speech. But just I hope that helps you in some.
Hi, ma'am. Just one question. So this is something that I've sort of seen in our club. Maybe it's not specific to our club, but it's just that suddenly, you have like a very fresh person in the club, or a very new person, and then we have like a veteran in the club who is starting a new pathway, and then they're doing their second speech. And then it so happens that the new person gets the chance to evaluate them. So they go through this whole I don't know, mental debacle about, okay, do I be very direct? Do I be soft with them? And then they come up with this situation saying, hey, this is a senior, maybe you can do it, right? So how can we encourage, because you get better at evaluations as you evaluate, right? Similar to you get better at speaking as you speak. So how do we sort of give a bit of a, I don't know, a different kind of encouragement to uh, newer members, for them to say, okay, it's okay, you can push through, and maybe give them a bit of tips on uh, not being nervous enough to do the evaluation.
Okay, I would say there is almost two sides to this question, because there is also the attitude of the veteran Toastmaster. If you are unlucky enough to have a veteran Toastmaster who doesn't like to be evaluated by a new member, you need to also tackle that part of it. But if you are lucky enough to have, now I sometimes think, I have sort of said to people, you can put me down as somebody they can evaluate, because I'm quite okay with it. I'm quite okay with whatever they say. Then what you need to work on is the young Toastmaster. And I would suggest two things. Firstly, I would say to them, this is your chance to develop. This is what you have paid your money and joined the club for. So you look at the speech and you just go with your gut, as it were, take your gut reaction, write down what you feel. How you present it is the challenge. You might say, for instance, to the veteran speaker, you might say, I'm a comparatively new member in the club, and to be honest, so
we can't hear you properly, Krishani.
Exactly get as excited about it as you are. But I could, I think it's my connection. Is that better now?
Yeah, that's much.
Is that better now? Okay. So then, because then what the speaker is saying is that this is her reaction to. So the content itself is good. The speaker, the evaluator can say, I can see that there is value in the content, but from my point of view, I am unable to appreciate it as much as maybe you would. And that is honest. And in a way, that is helpful for the speaker as well, because the speaker needs to realize that he's now addressing a varied audience. So he needs to be able to actually cater to all of them. So I would suggest that you tell the junior person, tell them that evaluating is a skill. And if they are if they're evaluating a senior person, they can take that skill to almost like another level, because they are evaluating a speaker who is maybe very good, who is probably speaking at a different pitch to them in terms of the content and the subject matter. And so it's that much more of a challenge for them. But also tell them this, that every speaker is entitled to an evaluation. So therefore, they should not think, I have nothing to tell you because you're a veteran speaker. Hey, it is also not kind. So tell them, be kind to this speaker. He's entitled to an evaluation, and say to them, this is how I felt about your speech. And that is helpful to the evaluator, because whatever it is, that person who is evaluating it is also a member of his audience, and he needs to know how to relate to that person. So if this person, even if this person says, it didn't attract me, I couldn't relate to it, that is helpful to that speaker, because the speaker now knows, okay, that's not the kind of topic I should choose to speak on here, or I can pick a certain aspect of it and find a way to make it interesting to this young person, which is a good enough challenge to the speaker, because again, like I said, if the speaker is addressing anybody outside, they need to know how to talk to various kinds of people. So again, like I said, just to sum it up, you tell the speaker, tell the evaluator, every speaker is entitled to an evaluation. You just share very honestly how you felt about the speech, but word it in a way which is tactful. And if it didn't attract you or interest you, you can say that honestly, but in a way which is tactful, and tells him that even though you weren't excited about it, you could see the effort that went into him actually making that speech, and you appreciate that. I hope that helps.
Yes, that helps a lot. And again, sorry, I have a few questions. Something that I wanted to also check on is that maybe it's because we are a bit more complacent in terms of where we do the evaluations. We sort of, I think I sort of identified this in a bit earlier, because my mentor also, took me to a side and had a very interesting discussion, that during the evaluations, sometimes I maybe it's human bias, but let's say we get a chance to evaluate somebody who is like really good at their speech, and then maybe today maybe not was their day, And then we have this, I don't know, human bias in our head saying that somehow or the other in an evaluation by a slip of a tongue, we might say something like, we know that you do very well, but today may not be your best day. So those are things that we, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of contest and whatnot, we do tend to avoid because the evaluation is particularly to that speech. But I think because we are in our club setting, we tend to get a little more comfortable with it. But that's also a practice that might, later on become a part and parcel of your evaluation. Sorry, ma'am, you're on mute.
Sorry, yes, understood. I would say one of the things I've often said is that whatever we learn at the club level, and it gets polished as we go up the higher level. So there are things that will happen at the club level which I think are unavoidable and which maybe in a way are of value, because in our clubs we tend to become kind of like family, right? So it happens that way. And I think to some extent, I would have heard that as well. Like somebody might say to someone, today you weren't your usual lively self. For instance, when you made the speech, we didn't see the excitement that you normally have. And that is true, as you say, because we know the speaker and we have evaluated them before, we've enjoyed their speeches before, that comes in. And I think perhaps at a club level, that's not necessarily a bad thing from the fellowship point of view, because it shows that we really know each other and we get on well. If you feel that an evaluator has been basically not evaluating the current speech, but mainly talking about how this is not how you normally are, as a general evaluator, you're in a position to kind of make a general remark which says, we need to remind people to evaluate in a way that they can then take part at contests. So perhaps we should focus more on the current speech than on what they are normally like, or you can take the person aside and tell it. But I think it's true the point you're making is good. And so it needs to be brought out either by that evaluator's mentor or by the general evaluator through a comment or by some comment like that, where people are taught that if you want to say something like that, maybe don't do it in front of everyone, or maybe put it as part of your summary at the end, but give value to the contestant, to the speaker anyway, by just focusing on today's speech and how it was today, and give your main value through that. At the end, you might say something like, personally, I thought you weren't the way you normally are today. Just one throwaway line if you want, like I said, just to show that, we are family and we know how you are normally. But as you say, you can tell them, give value to the speaker by focusing on today's speech and the here and the now. Again, even that throwaway line kind of is a warning to the speaker, because if that speaker wants to take part at contest level, though it sounds cruel to say, they have to find a way to kind of be on their best behavior, even if they're going through a bad day. If it's a contest, they can't afford to let themselves get brought down. So even a throwaway comment like that can add some value to a speaker. It's again a question of how it's put across.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I also have a question of mine. So I think you have heard a lot of evaluations. What is the biggest mistake that evaluators do?
Oh, that's a tough one. What is the biggest mistake? Personally, I have found it, the summarizing of the speech, I have found that one of the worst things, because you spend your 3 minutes basically just redoing the speech and not giving any value to the speaker. So I would say that's one of the worst things that you can do, to just summarize the speech.
Okay. Thank you, DTM Chrishanthi. I think we are on time.
Jeffrey, I think I have one more question.
Okay.
DTM Chrishanthi, now this is since we are referring to evaluation as well as humorous contests too. Now there's a kind of a misconception, or it kind of in our mind, that humorous speech itself should carry humor. The message is not that important. So when it comes to evaluation, are we treating them as, because if you look at the ballot, it's almost the same ballot which we have for humorous as well as international speech contest. In that context, how do we look at a humorous speech, or do we need to look at the humorous speech in a different context rather than the international speech contest when it comes to evaluation?
You're talking about how do you evaluate a humorous speech, or are you saying that the
No, what I'm referring, when you come to international speech contest, we more or less look into the message, key message what a person gives as one of the critical. But in the humorous context, do we look at in the same aspect?
so
Let's say you are an evaluator or a judge in a humorous contest.
yes, now
Are
I
you
need
looking at the same aspect?
yes, I have not the very latest humorous contest ballot I have not looked at, but I can tell you this. I was district chief judge a few years ago, and in my judges training, I had a senior Toastmaster who stood up and argued with me that a humorous speech contest doesn't need to have a message. And I was actually quite shocked because it's there in black and white in the speech contest rule book and even in the ballot. In fact, now TI has gone to the extent of putting it there, saying it must be not a string of one-liners. It has to be a coherent speech. So, in fact, I used to think also sometimes we used to call it the humor contest. I don't know if you've heard that, but I heard people saying, oh, it's the humor contest. And I think that is mistake number one, because it's the humorous speech contest. So the speech should be humorous, but there is a speech, which means there should be an opening, a body, a conclusion, and a message with humor in it. So in fact, in the ballot, I think we've often made this point before, there's X amount of marks for humor, but there's so many marks for the message. So most judges, I mean, I know there are sometimes some judges out there who might think differently, but there is meant to be a lot of value in the message. If you look at a lot of the international speech contestants, you'll find that almost nobody comes to the top 5 who doesn't have humor. So humor is a vital ingredient in one of the winning speeches. But they have learned over the years that by the time they come to that level, they've mastered the art of blending the humor in so well that it adds value to their message, it enhances the message, and it's part of the whole thing, but there is definitely a message. So if we can do that at the humorous speech contest level as well, then, it's that much easier for you to do that and win at the international speech level.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification.
Yeah, so we have another question in the chat.
Sorry, I couldn't see who that was, so I couldn't
That was
understand.
Menaka.
Okay.
So we have a chat saying that how to not run the risk of being too nice when giving evaluation speech.
Too nice. Generally speaking, I would think if you have any suggestions to make on how the speech could have been done differently, even if it's only 2 points, I think that is one way in which, for sure, they won't say you're being too nice, because you're actually saying there were at least 2 things in there which didn't click with you and which you wished they could have done differently. I think that's number one. But that means that when you're analyzing or listening to their speech, you need to really find that. Now, I'll just share an example. I know once I was evaluating this speaker, I won't name the person, but an excellent lady Toastmaster, excellent speaker, was really good. And this speaker was actually playing the role of, she was dressed in actually men's clothes. She was playing the role as if she was like the husband, and just playing the role. And I remember right at the end when I was giving an evaluation, I commented because her vocabulary is extensive, language skills are flawless, sentence construction without fault, very nicely done, delivery great. And I remember I made this comment about her shoes. She had the jacket, the trouser, the tie, the shirt, everything, and she was wearing lady shoes. And I said to her, small thing, but if you really wanted the full ensemble, that would have been nice to see. So I think that's one of the arts we need to develop as an evaluator, even if it's a top-notch speech. I've often said that it's like, Sangakkara or Mahela, when they're in form and they're batting, there's nothing they can do wrong, absolutely nothing. So then I think, you pick up the things which they're doing really well, that speaker is doing really well, and point them out as examples of how they're making an effective speech. But if you're analyzing effectively and well, I'm not saying look for faults for the sake of finding a fault, but if you're being genuine about it, then sometimes there might be something which didn't click with you, which you can mention. But if truly 100% there was literally nothing they did wrong, then I would say focus on what they did right and show why it went so right. And I think if that is considered as being too nice, it shouldn't be, because you're actually explaining how they made it work, which means that anybody else listening can also do the same thing and make it work. Hope I didn't confuse you there.
Any more questions? So thank you, DTM Chrishanthi, for that wonderful session. So yeah, I will share the attendance QR now, so you can scan and do the QR. So I will invite Rumini Sumanasinghe to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Toastmaster Jeffrey, for conducting the Q&A session, and thank you to everyone who actively participated by sharing your questions and thoughts. As we come to the close of this enriching session, it is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks. First and foremost, on behalf of Division A, I extend our sincere gratitude to distinguished Toastmaster Chrishanthi Emmanual for sharing her invaluable knowledge, experience, and insights with us today. Your inspiring Toastmasters journey, combined with your extensive corporate leadership experience, has provided us with practical lessons and valuable perspectives that will undoubtedly benefit to our club officers and members. Thank you for your dedicating your time and for delivering such an engaging and impactful session. A special note of appreciation goes to our Division Director, Toastmaster Menaka Pereira, for his leadership, guidance, and continuous commitment to the growth and success of the Division A. Our heartfelt thanks goes to Assistant Division Director, Program Quality, Distinguished Toastmaster Viruli De Silva, who coordinated with our resource person and played a key role in making today's training possible. Thank you, Viruli, for your dedication and effort behind the scenes. I would also like to acknowledge and thank our division leadership team. PR Manager Toastmaster Elon Newton, Assistant Admin Manager Toastmaster Jeffrey Pereira, Admin Manager Toastmaster Chaturani Karyavasam, for your assistance in coordinating and supporting the administrative arrangements for this event. My sincere appreciation goes to all our area directors for your continued commitment to supporting your clubs and encouraging officer development and learning opportunities within your areas. To all the club officers, Toastmasters members, and guests who joins us today, thank you for your active participation, enthusiasm, and commitment to continuous learning. Your presence and engagement made this session truly meaningful. Finally, let us extend our appreciation to everyone who worked behind the scenes to ensure the smooth execution of this program. Thank you again, once again, to all who contributed to making today's training session a success. Wishing you everyone continued success in your Toastmasters journey. Thank you. Stay inspired, keeping learning, and have a wonderful day ahead. Good night to all of you.